economics that will help you learn the things that are between the lines. A lot of times there are professors and on university campuses that will teach you. Anybody can teach you, what a 401k is, or what a stock is, and all this, what an earnings report is, and things like that. I think that it's the stuff that's between the lines that's really going to make the difference for you. I think that it's sort of that stuff that they don't tell you in school that really makes a difference between people that do well and the people that struggle. The people that become millionaires and the people that just wish that they were millionaires. And so one of the things I'd like to do is I love the way money links to real life. I love the way our economic choices links to so many other things we see, things we see in the media, stuff like that. And I guess because, finance is my area, I tend to just see the economics, the black wealth issues everywhere. And one of the big areas where I see a lot of black wealth issues is in hip hop. Hip hop music it was created by black people, and black people should have owned it. Black people should be the ones who are making the most money from it. But it's kind of like the beauty industry, where we create the wealth, but other people take the wealth, right? We bring in the money, and other people are walking away with the money. And so with hip hop, it's real interesting because you've got these individuals in hip hop that are these hip hop moguls, and to some extent, that is a liability to the black community. It's a huge liability, largely because this becomes kind of the blueprint for success for a lot of young black people, a lot of young black men, especially, and some women too. I see that they'll notice all the different ways that they won't notice all the other ways you can make money. They'll only notice one or two. Like, I become a basketball player or a rapper, and I think you're missing 99% of all the different ways to make money that exist in this world. But yet this is what's marketed to the kids, right? You look at Forbes magazine. Forbes is always every year going to have a list of the hip hop billionaires, hip hop moguls, and everybody wants to do that, and everybody kind of admires that. And then you also have political dysfunction that comes out of that, because next thing you know, your rappers are becoming your black leaders, right? And some rappers are very smart people. You guys know I brought Ice Cube in. Today I'm going to actually interview a guy on my YouTube channel by the name of D1. D1 is a rapper who has made millions of dollars without a record deal. D1, as quiet as kept, turned down the chance to join Cash Money Records down in New Orleans by Lil Wayne's joint and everything else, because he knew that that lifestyle that they were promoting was not healthy, not just for the community but also for himself. And he actually got a record deal. He left the label. He actually walked away from the deal and went independent because he was making better money independently than he was with a deal. Now, why does this matter? Why am I bringing this up? Well, because today I was thinking about Diddy. And I've heard a lot of conversation lately about Diddy and the role that Diddy's had with Bad Boy Records, and he was kind of the contemporary with Suge Knight over in Death Row. So you had Bad Boy and Death Row and East Coast, West Coast, that type of thing, and the media kind of created all that hype. And Diddy's the one to survive. Suge Knight did, obviously, he didn't end up so well. But the interesting thing about that, though, is that despite the fact that we know about the problems with Death Row, I've kind of broken that down just from a black wealth standpoint. Again, remember, when Suge Knight let Death Row fall apart, and when Tupac got killed, and all this other chaos happened, you literally lost billions of dollars in that event. Right now, Death Row Records is owned by the same company that owns Mr. Potato Head, Hasbro. Hasbro bought Death Row Records, and it wasn't a big acquisition. It wasn't anything significant. It was like literally this piece of crap, extra little thing they threw in with a deal where they were looking at a bunch of other companies, and they bought a whole package of companies, and Death Row happened to be one of them. And this is a lost opportunity, right? When you talk about black wealth and you talk about lost black wealth, you have to look at all the situations where we could have had money and we didn't keep it. And you also have to analyze the dead body, so to speak. When somebody gets killed, my sister does autopsies, and whenever somebody dies, there's always the coroner that must go in and do the autopsy. You got to look at the dead body and run some tests and figure out, like, what happened here. How did this body die? So with companies like a Death Row Records, you have this dead body, this black wealth that was alive and vibrant. You were at the top of a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and somehow this thing just died in front of our eyes. So when you do the autopsy, and here's the thing: if you don't do the autopsy, then you're going to miss information. If you don't study what happened, then you're going to make the same mistake over and over again. So if you study something like Death Row Records, and I'm gonna link this back to Diddy in a minute because I think Diddy is important to talk about, because Diddy, remember, Suge Knight and Diddy were kind of like this. If you remember back at that Source Awards back in the day, where Suge Knight goes on stage with his big red, he's big bulky guy, he had on his red. He's like, if you ever wanna come rap with a label that where you ain't got the CEO all in the videos, all on the songs, then come to Death Row, right? Y'all remember that? And then Diddy had gone up and done his thing, right? So it was East Coast, West Coast, Suge Knight, Diddy, or whatever, right? Well, so when you look at Death Row Records and what happened with Death Row, you have to look at culture. You have to understand that a lot of that wealth was lost because the culture was not one that was conducive to wealth. Economics flows out of culture the same way you grow a flower out of. You can grow wonderful plants and vegetables out of some types of soil, but some types of soil nothing grows, and some types of soil everything dies. Right. So when you talk about economic growth, you have to ask yourself, what is the economic soil? Is this soil, particularly in your own family, is this soil where everything grows and things flourish and money gets made and money gets preserved and nurtured and etc.? Or is this soil where everything dies? Is it like a desert? So, when you look at Death Row and you saw that, hundreds of millions of dollars is flowing through this company because they're literally at the top of the music industry. The soil was bad, right? The soil wasn't soil that was conducive to making structured business deals in an appropriate way. It wasn't designed to maintain and nurture relationships. There was a lot of shenanigans happening in the studio, lots of illegal activity, from the drugs to the weapons to people getting beat up because they didn't make the song right. Just a lot of things that a lot of baggage, a lot of bad cultural baggage that leads to destruction and doesn't lead to the building of wealth. And then so let's take it all across to the East Coast, right? So you have Bad Boy, which was a label that did survive all that, right? Diddy, strategic, smart, all these other things. He survived that era. He survived it. Ice Cube survived it. Snoop Dogg survived it. Dr. Dre survived it. Those guys went on to thrive and make a lot of money, whereas other people, Suge Knight, Eazy-E, Tupac, no longer here. So to their credit, it did take a certain degree of strategy and thinking to build that wealth. But then there's this deeper question about Bad Boy Records that people have been asking me, whose fault is it that Diddy's artists, if you look at a long list, there's a long list of artists that were with Bad Boy that left or that didn't do so well, right? The biggest names maybe being Black Rob, who just died. But then you had Craig Mack and every couple of years Shine, who went to prison, and just a bunch of other, artists where you're kind of like, God, like what happened here? Like why can't we point to a long list of entertainers that are really successful that got their start with Diddy, right? You can't really find a long list like that. You just can't. Even Biggie, is not here, right? And so it's interesting, right? And you contrast that to say somebody like, say, Russell Simmons, who I remember that they did a special. I know Russell. I've talked to Russell many, many, many times. I worked with him in 2013 to change the incarceration laws under the Obama administration, which was a real battle. And I shout out to Russell Simmons because he really held his ground and he really stuck to his word in that whole ordeal. And they put a lot of pressure on him. That was one of the things that made me sort of turn off to the Obama administration, because I saw a lot of things up close that the public doesn't get to see. And I was very disappointed at how hard it was to get them to do something that they said that they were going to do. And that kind of led me to the conclusion that a lot of people make promises to Black people because Black people are easily duped, that you can promise us anything. And, we're like that little girl with low self-esteem who would just believe anything you say. And then they just drop the ball and we just still keep worshiping the same people. And so anyway, I remember Russell, they did some HBO special or something where they had all these comedians that came on and we're thanking Russell for getting their careers off the ground. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was like Steve Harvey and Chris Tucker and I want to say not Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and just all these different people. Maybe I got the names wrong, but a lot of entertainers that you maybe saw in Def Comedy Jam, from Martin Lawrence across the board, who were basically saying, "Thank you, Russell. You helped me, you got me here, etc." Right? So that's those very different perceptions, very different trajectories, and so I would say that there probably is something there there in terms of different ways of doing business, right? No question about it. And I also would say that if someone wants to say that Diddy is that he does business in a way that is maybe ruthless and very straight to the point, and where he's going to make his money no matter what happens to you, that might all be true. I don't know. I've never met Diddy. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. One of his people reached out to me, but I never got a chance to talk to him, and maybe we never will, and it's okay. But if Diddy's listening, he can come on this channel. I'd love to hear his point of view. But here's the point. Here's what I want to get to though with this, right? When you talk about Diddy and whether or not it's Diddy's fault that so many of his artists have struggled, right? If is it Diddy's fault that Black Rob died and didn't have any money and had to do a GoFundMe account? I guess I don't know if he had insurance or not. I think Diddy stepped forward and paid some of his funeral expenses, or is it Diddy's fault? When other artists talk about their financial problems, I think that really speaks to this thing I want you to understand about how money works, how economics works, how capitalism works, and how economic competition works. Um, a lot of economics is really warfare. It's not this thing where everything is based on this sort of charitable or inalienable right of any man to expect another man to look out for his interests, right? If I'm 50 years old. I can't think of another 50-year-old man that I can blame for my personal financial problems. If I'm sitting here, again, Black Rob had high blood pressure, right? That's one of the things that causes strokes and everything. I ran into high blood pressure a few years ago, and I had a choice, right? I had to change certain things, or bad things were going to happen, and I don't recall at any point saying it's somebody else's fault, right? Or maybe if you have financial problems and you're in your 40s and 50s, I can't think of somebody I knew in my 20s where I can look back and say that I'm struggling financially at the age of 45 because of what somebody did to me when I was 30 or when I was 25, right? And also I think that there's something to be talked about in terms of business, right? When you think about business, it's it's interesting because you have some people that do well and some people that don't. And if you look in the entertainment industry, you have guys like Ice Cube, for example, who sat down with Jerry Heller and NWA, and he offered them all $80,000 checks and gave a new Corvette or Ferrari or something, and just said all you got to do is sign on the dotted line. Well, all the guys signed except Ice Cube. Ice Cube did not sign, right? Because he said, I'm not signing this. This is not. I'm not going to sell my whole future for $80,000 in a car, right? Or if you look at things like brand management, proper brand management, meaning that if you work with a Diddy or anybody and they put you out there and you're famous, well, there are things you can do with that brand that go beyond just making another song. If you look at Nas right now, Nas leveraged his brand to make deals with some of these venture capitalists to form Queensbridge Partners, and they just made a boatload of money on the Coinbase direct listing. It's not an IPO; it's a direct listing, right? There's a difference there. You don't have to follow as many rules with a direct listing, and also with a direct listing, it is not a fundraiser for the company. An IPO is where companies go to raise money. A direct listing is where companies go to liquidate their shares, right? So you got to be careful about the Coinbase IPO direct listing because what's happening is that the reason the share shot up so high and then started going down is because when the higher the price goes, the more the insiders realize that the price is too high and they go ahead and start selling. So when they start selling, you got to ask yourself, should I be buying? Should I be buying something that somebody is dying to get rid of? That might mean that the price is a little bit too high. Okay. But with that said, though, what I thought about what people, brought to me about, is it Diddy's fault? Is it Diddy's fault? I'll say from a cultural standpoint, I never really understood the idea of a 50-year-old man in his well-being being the responsibility of another 50-year-old man. I just never grew up in that world. Although it does not say that Diddy did everything, on the up and up, and that everything was done fair and square, and or that the contracts weren't overly complex or biased and leveraged in Diddy's favor. The best I could say is that contracts are supposed to be read and contracts are supposed to be read by lawyers, right? Now, the problem you have in hip hop is that there is an imbalance in power, right? If I am, because here's the issue you have. again, this is due to how we're raised and trained. Remember, I told you you may not get your reparations for slavery, but they always give you preparations for slavery. So one way you are prepared to be a capitalist slave from birth is that we tend to have an oversupply of laborers, consumers, and entertainers. We have an oversupply. We produce singers and rappers and basketball players like you would not believe, and we produce more athletes than China produces microchips. And so what happens then is that you run into these situations where you've got a million kids from the hood who are all incredibly talented, but can't monetize their talent, right? So they've all learned how to rap, but none of them learned how to start a business. None of them were taught, or educated the way D1 was, where D1 knew how to take his talent and monetize it. He knew how to convert his talent gold into actual physical gold, right? Whereas most of our kids don't learn business, which is why you need to teach business to your kids. So in order for them to process this talent and turn it into actual money, where do they go? They have to go to the record labels. Well, Diddy, if you look at the way Diddy, again, I'm talking about economic soil. Diddy was put in a different type of economic soil where he wasn't mentored just to be a rapper. Right, a lot of people can, eventually learn how to rap, and he knows how to rap. He's rapped on songs, they've been hits, whatever, right? But Diddy was also mentored to be a boss. Diddy was taught to enter the game at this position as opposed to that position. He was taught to come in the penthouse as opposed to trying to come up through the basement, right? Instead of starting from the bottom, now we here. Diddy said, I'm already here. I'm not going to the bottom. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just going to go to a higher version of the top. I'm always going to be a boss, except now at 25, I'm the boss of a little company. When I'm 50, I'll be the boss of a big company. And so as a result, you have a supply-demand imbalance, like you have in economics, where you've got, where Diddy says, hey, we're taking auditions for new rappers, and and 5,000 people show up, and they're all trying to get the same opportunity. Well, what that does is it creates a real power imbalance that makes it almost impossible for you to even negotiate with the labels. You come in there and they tell you, here's the contract, sign it or don't sign it. We don't care. And there's no law saying they can't do that. Right. And and now who was it? I think one of the rappers, I don't know if it was Jadakiss or somebody else, said that maybe the hip hop should become unionized or something, which I don't disagree with that. I think labor unions can help shift that power imbalance, but we don't have that right now. Right. So you have no leverage in that negotiation. So even if you are a person who who does what I say, like I say, look, read your contracts, get a lawyer to read them, etc. Even then, you still are in a disadvantageous situation because you don't have as many options as the other party. When I talk to my girls about dating, I don't give them a lot of specific advice about what type of man you should date. Of course, I talk about, hey, he should be responsible, he should be sturdy, never have sex with a man who would be a good father. I say things like that. But really, I also tell them, most importantly, I said, usually in a negotiation, which your relationship is a negotiation, the person with the most options wins, right? So the girl who has 10 guys that will gladly be happy to take her home that day is going to usually have a stronger negotiating position than the woman who is instantly hooked on some guy who doesn't care about her, right? And so the same thing is true when you talk about contract negotiations. The only artists that literally have leverage, in my view, are the artists like the D1s or the Immortal Techniques or the E40s, who say, look, I understand business the way you do. Now I can see the value of doing a contract with you, but I don't really need to do this. MC Hammer talks about how his first record deal, he was making more money out of the trunk of his car than he would have made at the label anyway. Master P talks about how he couldn't get signed. He was worth too much to get signed by a label because he knew how to make money, right? So really, when you talk about this the whole bad boy debacle, and what happened with Diddy and his artists, and I don't know what's going on. I mean, for all I know, Diddy could be a bastard. I don't know this man. I will say though that when you're talking about the realities of it all, at the end of the day, if you don't have any options, if you don't have another move, if you don't have a plan B, a plan C, and a plan D, then you're probably not gonna be able to negotiate what you're looking for. And also, if you're not conscious, if you're not economically aware, meaning that if you're too caught up in the booty and the bling and the drugs and whatever, then you're gonna be a sucker. You're gonna be a lame duck fish sitting at the table being ready to be exploited. And there are millions of people that show up prepared to be exploited, and then all they have for the rest of their life is the moral high ground, if you will, to be able to walk around and say, look, so and so took advantage of me. And they probably did, because that's how money works. If you're giving something away, somebody's going to take it. If you're not protecting what is yours, then someone else will just say, oh, thank you for the free gift, I appreciate that. And so when I look at the thing with Diddy, and what people have said about him and the artist, and what's happened to him and everything else, and my heart goes out to these guys. I really feel bad for them. But again, I admit I didn't grow up in a household where I was trained that a grown black man is allowed to spend too much time in self pity. That's just not how my father operated. That's not how we operate, in our household. But I will say that reading contracts obviously matters. Brand management matters, right? Because when you are famous, when somebody puts you out there, they're giving you millions of dollars in value just by making you famous. And if you know what to do with that fame, then you're in good shape. If you have no idea what to do and you're leaning on a record label or a movie studio to help you monetize that fame, then you're probably at a disadvantage. I also look at the hip hop culture, and we talk about fertile economic soil. Hip hop, the toxic side of hip hop culture, not all of it, because hip hop is very diverse. It's extremely diverse, right? So we're not talking about all hip hop. We're talking about that segment. You know what I'm talking about. That segment of hip hop that really breeds a lot of very unhealthy habits that create very toxic, self-destructive economic soil. I'm talking about a culture that glorifies ignorance, where the dumber you are, seriously. And I'm not making fun of the young kids today that are rapping now, but my God, like literally, it's like being as stupid as possible is like celebrated, to the point where you got your smart people imitating your stupid people because they want to fit in. That is literally something that some white supremacists is so happy about, because we've trained black people to want to be as dumb as possible. And then so you talk about glorification of ignorance, financial excess, right? I'm going to rap about how much money I have and how much money I gave away, which basically means I'm rapping about being a complete financial sucker. Like, I'm literally rapping about how stupid I am financially, because I just went to this white man's jewelry store and gave him $10 million of my great grandkids' money, right? That 10 million could grow to 100 million if I invest it properly and leave that as part of my legacy. But instead, I'm bragging to the community. I'm mass marketing economic self-destruction to my community by telling them that my sign of status is the fact that I just gave $10 million to a white man. What the hell's wrong with you? That's insanity to me. It's absolutely crazy. The sexual irresponsibility is a big problem in a lot of hip hop. When you have guys just literally rapping about how many women they have run through, do you understand how deep that rabbit hole goes in terms of the number of problems that are created in a community when you have that kind of mindset? When you're talking about all these poor little girls, think about this, process this for a minute. This is, again, I talk to intelligent black people. Stupid people should probably not be here. So if you want to be here, you either have to be intelligent or want to be intelligent. One of the two. If you're not in that category, this is going to sound stupid to you. You're not going to get it. I remember when Eazy-E died of AIDS. And y'all remember that. And everybody talked about Eazy-E. And I thought that was so interesting that everyone talked about Eazy-E, but nobody talked about how many hundreds and hundreds of women Eazy-E must have slept with before he died of AIDS, right? And he's not the only one. Usually they'll claim to die from something else, because AIDS is a stigmatized death. So very rarely will it get out that somebody died of AIDS. Usually they'll die. It's like, oh, it was kidney failure, or oh, it was blah blah blah, whatever. I don't know, right? But there's usually, like, I know this. I saw this up close. I knew someone who died from that, and his family didn't announce it that way. They announced it as something else, right? And so I thought about that, and I said, this is interesting, because people that have lots of sex with people who have lots of sex. So I'm a mathematician, and in mathematics, we have something called a multiplier effect, or what might call a ripple effect. And that means that it's like, if you think about COVID, for example, why do people overreact when, say, 100 people get COVID? Well, that's because that 100 people may spread it to another 1,000 people, who spread it to another 10,000, who spread it to another million, right? So that just the health effects alone of sexual irresponsibility is huge. And that I'm not even talking about unwanted pregnancies and baby mama-itis. You go deeper down that rabbit hole. Let's talk about that. Uh, if you ever want to have financial problems, if you ever want to destroy yourself financially, brothers, go out here and have a bunch of kids with a bunch of women, and watch how badly that child support court will whoop you in your ass. Like that child support court will take every penny you have to the point where you are no longer an economic player in this game of life. You have almost no ability at that point to build any sort of empire, any sort of legacy of wealth, because they got you scrambling. They got you scrambling. You can't secure anything. It's almost like when I play, you guys know that I started playing the video games and stuff with my kids just for fun and whatever, and we talk about stocks and stuff while we do it. And so I'm meeting a lot of brothers when we play. And one of the things that can happen is it's this thing called the war zone. So you're literally dropped in this battle zone. You guys have seen me talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but it's so much fun, right? I'm really having fun. And the thing is, you're going to war, right? You're going out with your crew, and you're going and you're finding other teams, and you're fighting in a battle with all these other teams. And sometimes we'll just get our butts kicked. And I'll say, guys, the reason we got our asses kicked is because we're scrambling. You were running that way, I was running that way. You weren't telling me what was going on. We were running for our lives, trying not to get shot. We didn't have our weapons ready. We didn't have our system set up. We didn't have our protection, our defenses set up. So we got our butts kicked, right? Well, the same thing is true with black men and women that want to be empire builders. If you spend all your time scrambling, then you can't spend very much time winning. If you're spending all your time avoiding destruction, then you can't spend any time engaged in constructive activity, right? If you spend all your time playing strugglenomics, then you have no ability to play powernomics. You can't play offense when you're busy playing defense. So when you go out here and you're not thoughtful about the first business you'll ever run, the first empire you ever build is your family. Where you plant your seed, black man, is one of the most important decisions that you'll ever make. So you run around, chasing the big button to smile and dropping it on any girl that offers it to you, then you can find yourself in a situation where you can't build anything because you're gonna be scrambling. You got bullets coming at your head from every direction. You got angry babies, mamas destroying your children and taking all your money and talking bad about your name and ruining your reputation, right? So what I would just say though is that with hip hop culture, it's very unfortunate that so many black men are swayed by this, because it teaches a kind of it teaches the version of manhood that is not built for the development of empires and the building of kings. In fact, Ice Cube, the reason I like Ice Cube a lot, and I would say that we're friends, because I like the brother from what I've the conversations we've had. I really think he's a cool guy, and he had a song years ago that I loved, and it was called "Ass Over Cash." Go listen to that song. It's from like 1998, 99. And in that song, we were both in our 20s at that time. And basically, what he was basically saying in the song is, if you're a black man, you have to have some degree of sexual discipline if you ever want to achieve. Meaning that if you run around just chasing women and you're not chasing the things that matter to you, it might be power, it might be stability, it might be happiness, it might be peace, it might be protecting your children, whatever matters to you. If you're just constantly just chasing one random woman after another, you're gonna end up scrambling in these crazy situations that you can't come back from. Okay, so you talk about the toxic culture, the glorification of ignorance, the celebration of financial excess and irresponsibility, sexual irresponsibility, the violence, right? Every 3 weeks, we hear about a rapper who died from either three things tend to happen to rappers. This happens at least once a month to some famous rapper. Either some rapper dies from a drug overdose or some other health related activity. A rapper gets murdered by somebody else. It's happened to a lot of the young guys now. Or a rapper goes to prison. Those three things. And the thing, and what's really interesting is that you've been trained to celebrate these things, right? And remember that when these things are happening, you're destroying black wealth, because you can't build wealth in a community where all your men are going to prison or being killed or dying from health related issues or overdoses. You can't build from that, especially when these men were on the track to become billionaires. Like DMX was on a billionaire track, but for whatever reason, he wasn't able to get away from the drugs. And it wasn't just luck, bad luck. It wasn't just, because Jesus didn't bless him enough. It wasn't because Diddy did something to him or somebody else. A lot of it relates to the culture that he was in the middle of, where he wasn't incentivized to make choices that were going to create the life that he wanted. For example, when I think about my father and he told me about his heroin addiction that he had when he came back from Vietnam, a lot of brothers went to Vietnam and got linked up with that heroin. And I mean, Vietnam was such a nightmare. I don't know. I mean, I don't blame anybody who went there and did whatever they could to find their peace, because it was an absolute hell. And I said to him, I said, "How did you get off heroin?" That a lot of people would get on heroin, they can't get off. He said, "I made a choice." He said, "I thought about the life I wanted, and I realized that heroin was not going to give me the life that I wanted. And as a result of that choice, my father has a legacy, right? Like I'm sitting here, I talk to 100,000 people a day, and I speak very highly of my father. So even when my father's gone, he will live forever, because all of y'all know about my daddy because I talk about him all the time, right? But then on top of that, he's got children and grandchildren that look up to him, that love him, grandchildren, great grandchildren that will be multimillionaires. He's got a family name that is very well respected, right? So you compare that to what would have happened if he'd taken plan B, right? What would have happened if he'd opened up door number two, which was the door of a life of heroin and women. And believe me, I mean, all that was available. He talks about Vietnam and how the women were all available, and then he come back to the States and there's women everywhere. And I saw women flirting with my dad when I was young, and etc. What if he'd taken that path? What if he just said, you know what? I'm young. I'm gonna live my life. Remember the black exploitation films were out there where they want every black man to want to be a pimp. So they're training black men to get into pimpology, where instead of looking up to men who are leaders, who are intelligent, who are capable and responsible, you're looking up to men who say things like, "Yo, bitch chose me." Right? Like, the iceberg slim type guys who not just don't just exploit women, but put themselves in really terrible situations where they end up dead or in prison or on drugs or whatever. Right? If he could have chosen that life, because that would have been, and that's the life a lot of young people are encouraged to choose, right? A lot of people, I hear it all the time where they say, well, why would you settle down and deal with that woman or deal with her kids or deal with this family stuff when you could live a life of nothing but pleasure seeking, irresponsible behavior, where it's one woman after another, smoking dope every day, getting drunk every day, doing whatever you want. I'm not judging that one way or the other. What I am saying though is that 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 eventually all the chickens come home to roost. They always come home to roost, right? When you see guys that are 45, 50 years old who are dying young, and mysteriously, usually there's a reasoning behind it. Usually there's something about the lifestyle that you can trace it back to, a YOLO lifestyle, pleasure-seeking lifestyle that led to their destruction. So even though it's not as much fun, I'm not gonna lie. I sit there and I got this woman next to me. Sometimes I want to eat the pizza and she'll make me eat the vegetables. Sometimes I want to go and hang out with my friends and she makes me go and we got to do stuff with the kids. Or sometimes I'm doing something I really enjoy and it's like, dang, I gotta go. We gotta go pick up the 10-year-old from dance class, right? And as much as it can be sort of that feeling like, okay, man, gosh, this isn't exactly what I want to do right now. There's another part of me that knows that you have to have moderation. You have to have moderation. You cannot live your whole life in excess. In fact, for example, you look at what T.I. and Tiny are going through. T.I. has always lived a life where he kind of it was a culture that said anything goes. And I'm not saying that they did anything wrong. This is not insinuating any illegality on their part. What I am saying though is that anything goes lifestyle eventually has a consequence attached to it. Right? There's some health consequence. There's some social consequence. There's some consequence in terms of the toll it'll take on your family later on. I can imagine what his family's feeling watching their parents go through something like this, right? There's a financial consequence. No matter what happens with T.I. and Tiny, they're going to be writing very big checks. When you got 30 people lined up saying they did something to me, and even though nothing's really proven, it doesn't matter. They're going to be writing very big checks, and that's going to impact their family wealth. So why am I bringing all this up? Well, it's because when you talk about wealth, you cannot talk about wealth without culture. You cannot talk about wealth without talking about culture. Saving is a culture. Wealth building in general is a culture. Investing is a culture. Ownership is a culture. Managing risk is a culture. Being healthy economically, psychologically, and physically is a culture. So you must ask yourself, before you ask yourself how I'm doing in terms of wealth, you must start by asking yourself, how am I doing in terms of culture? And I can tell you with complete certainty, again, remember, my PhD's in finance, so I think about economics in 1,000 different ways. Um, I can tell you with complete certainty that hip hop, the toxic side of hip hop, is one of the greatest black wealth killers in the history of this world. It literally has taken billion-dollar empires and reduced them to shambles. If black men were as committed to building wealth and building empires and building strength and security as we are committed to busting a rap, finding a girl with a big booty, or giving our money to Jake the jeweler, then we would have an extra $2 or $3 trillion in assets within our community right now. DMX wouldn't be dead; he'd be a billionaire. Right? Easy E wouldn't be dead; he'd be running a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Suge Knight would not be in prison; he would be sitting next to Bill Gates. Okay, so I just want you guys to understand what you're losing when you allow other people. And again, this is not putting the blame on the rappers or Diddy or anybody else. It's really it all comes back to white supremacy, right? There's certain things that they promote over other things. There's a reason why it's easier for an ignorant rapper to get on TV than a college professor, than a black college professor. It's because they've typecast you. They put you into the cosmic minstrel show where they want to see you in a certain role, and if you're not in that role, they're not comfortable, right? But there's a point where you have to take accountability for what you can do to change that, right? You have to take accountability in terms of some of the things we talk about in terms of black media ownership, developing and supporting black businesses, and black people educating our own children instead of sending your child to that white lady down the street and somehow thinking that she's going to really give your child black history. That's not going to happen. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on that. You guys know, since you guys were asking me about the Diddy thing, I wanted to start off really addressing that. Um, and again, no hard feelings toward Diddy or anybody else, and this is not meant to be a criticism of anybody. It's really meant to be an objective analysis that hopefully will help you make your decisions in a productive way. Okay, all right. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to answer questions based on what you guys submitted to me, and I'm going to get through these quickly. I know I spent some time on that one topic, but I really like that topic a lot because I feel like that helps you understand that other side, that shadow side of economics that they're never going to tell you about when they're teaching you, when they're teaching you, what an ROI is, or how to start a business, or how to manage a 401k. They don't talk about the real soil behind the type of plant that's grown. They just tell you maybe what type of seed to plant, but they don't tell you that if you plant that seed, you can have the most fertile seed in the world, but if you plant it in bad soil, it's not going to grow. All right. So anyway, one more thing I want to mention to you guys is that if you want to leave your questions for me for the Tuesday class, we meet every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. In case you don't know, just log in at theblackstockmarketprogram.com, theblackstockmarketprogram.com, and leave your question, and I'll answer your question first. All right.